Good morning. Thank you, Vanessa, for inviting me. And I must say, Brussels is a great choice. And I'm very happy to be back in my hometown today. Yesterday was very rich, and every speaker mentioned the millennials. So I hope that even though we are already slightly late on schedule, you will be interested to hear more today about these next generations of luxury shoppers. And I'm saying generations because it's the millennials, but also beyond millennials, Generation Z coming up. These younger consumers are a crucial group of luxury buyers for the industry. It's a massive opportunity business-wide, but it's also some challenges that luxury brands will have to tackle over the coming years. Now, I would like to start by introducing to the millennials generation. Who are they? Are they very different from their parents? Then zoom a bit on Gen Z, and I will conclude with a few questions that I believe are important for the luxury players. So let's start by introducing you to the millennials generation. So that's the agenda. Here we go. So as mentioned yesterday, millennials are the people who were born between 1981 and year 2000. Right? So it's people aged today between 18 and 35. It's approximately 2 billion people on the planet, so it's roughly 30% of the global population. Now, the buzz around Gen Y started in the US a few years ago, but actually millennials live primarily in emerging markets, which is home to 85% of the millennials. If you take just China and India today, it's home to 40% of them. They are rich and getting richer and richer. They are already worth more than 17 trillion private wealth, and this is growing fast and multiplying. And in terms of spending, they are also overspending the previous generations. They already spent 2.45 trillion in last year, in 2016, and this will be multiplied by 3 by 2025. So why do they matter for luxury? Yes, it's a large group of people, and it's a wealthy and wealthier group of people. But actually, there are 3 reasons why they are particularly important. First, it's already a sizable segment of luxury buyers, and it's a fast-growing one. Second, they are trendsetters, and they are actually impacting the market much broadly, touching the younger as well as the older generations. And last but not least, millennials have actually become a marketing channel themselves. So, in a nutshell, we are talking about the core luxury buyers of the future. We are also talking about the core talents that will make luxury brands successful in the long run. But that's another topic, and I'll come back next time if you invite me to tackle the millennials talent issue. Now, millennials have a true affinity with luxury. Luxury appeals to them. Actually, millennials were at the outset of what is today called affordable luxury. And as they get wealthier, they are trading up to more expensive brands. They already represent 20% of the personal luxury good markets, probably more than 20% if you take into account travel and hospitality. And as their wealth is increasing and their spending power is increasing, we estimate they will account for at least 40% of that market by 2025. So it's a large group, and they are setting the trends, right? They are influencing us here in the room, probably not many millennials around here. They're also influencing Gen Z, like my children are influenced by following millennials. So, for instance, they are the early adopters of new technologies, like the iWatch, right? They are the ones that are leading today the casualization across apparel and footwear. They are the ones that are developing the mobile payments, as was mentioned yesterday in a panel. Now, through their broad social networks, actually, they are spreading the word globally very fast. And that buzz among their communities is just accelerating the pace at which things are spreading. They are key influencers for Gen X, and we already see today in the streets, actually quite a few gray-haired Gen Xers walking to work with trendy sneakers, no ties. It's the end of the tie, I'm sorry.
The end of Hermes.
Yeah, and sending mails full of emojis. So they are setting trends, and they have become a marketing channel. So they are one of the main sources of brand content today through their digital activity and their social media usage. One example I like to take is the ratio between the actual official posts of a luxury brand and the number of hashtags on that brand on Instagram. So as of last Friday, which is last time I checked, a brand like Chanel had only 876 official posts, but they benefited from almost 52 million hashtags. It means that it's a ratio of 1 to 60,000 in terms of brand content between Chanel brand and its consumers. If you take Gucci, the ratio is 1 to 10,000. And some very small brands that are very active on social media, like Balmain, have also very high ratio. So another shift we see is also the endorsement of millennial celebrities by luxury brands. Now, this allows these brands to reach very rapidly a broad audience, yet very targeted young audience, in a very cost-effective manner. It allows them to modernize their perception. It allows them to actually benefit from positive comments and likes. Now, one example, and there are many examples, is the Instagram account of Lily Rose Depp, right? 3.3 million followers. So when she becomes a Chanel égérie with, the new fragrance launch, it immediately has impact on engagement among that community of 3.3 million millennials. So I hope we all agree they are a very important segment for luxury brands. But why is it so difficult to succeed engaging with them? Well, the first reason is that actually there is no such thing as a typical millennial. Just there is no such thing as a typical luxury buyer, right? They are a very heterogeneous group of people. First, they are coming from different countries, different geographies, different ethnicities. They have grown in diverse cultural environment and have developed their tastes and behaviors in very different ways. When it comes to luxury, they have been exposed to high-end brands in very different ways up to now. Now, they are from different geographies, they are also enjoying very different wealth level. And even though they are today 30 million ultra-wealthy millennials, the bulk of that generation is just entering the middle class and the consumption. So when it comes to luxury, this means that they are not consuming luxury the same way, depending on where they are. Also, a big difference there in terms of wealth is the economic environment in which they grew up. And here, the big difference is between mature economies, where you have a millennials generation that grew up under austerity, that went through several very important financial crises. And on the other side of the planet, you have the emerging market millennials, for whom up to now, tomorrow has almost always been better than yesterday. So it's very different mindset looking at the future. Millennials are at different life stages. You have teenagers, students, workaholics, single, married with kids. Today, only 1 out of 4 millennials has children, right? And as they move from one life stage to the other, of course, their consumption behavior is also evolving. Now, even within a geography, a life stage, and a wealth level, there is no such thing as one millennial segment. Actually, we did a research recently at McKinsey on the millennials in the US, where we identified 7 very distinct attitudinal segments of millennials. They resonate either with value, with quality, or with image. And it's for sure not easy to win them all with just a single value proposition. So they are different. But they also share some common characteristics, some values, some behaviors that are actually quite different from those of their parents. The first one is that millennials are true global citizens. They are traveling around the world. They live in a borderless environment. They have friends everywhere. They are much more multicultural, much more inclusive, a word that Victor used a bit earlier today, than their parents used to be. They are also digital natives. Millennials were born after the World Wide Web. They didn't have the chance to go through the same discovery as we did. Right? So not surprising that they are 100% digital, all mobile. And they are the first ones to adopt new technologies because tech innovation is actually part of their norm. Now, this has huge implications on their behaviors. Millennials are always on, expect everybody to be always on. And this has implications for brands, obviously. Now, a third element is values. We discussed that yesterday with Stella McCartney in the conversation. Millennials are in search of a meaning. They look for authenticity, and they value much more brands that behave in a sustainable way. They are values-driven, but millennials are also value-driven. It's a generation that is highly price conscious. They are always looking for the best deals, right? And even in luxury, they are looking for the best deals. But on the other hand, it's also the generation that is the most ready to pay a premium for something that they would perceive as value. It might be quality, it might be exclusivity, beauty, experience, anything, but they would pay a premium. It's also the me now generation. So starting with the me part, they love staging themselves, right? They love putting themselves, you see in many selfies of millennials. Most of them are posting daily, actually, pictures on their social media. But me is also that they are looking for personalization, customization in almost everything they do. They want it for themselves. The now part is that they grew up in a world of instant gratification and their patience level is very low. I mean, just imagine for a millennial, everything is just one click, one snap away, so they can't wait. For sure, they cannot wait more than 10 seconds for a page to load on their mobile phone. They are social and connected. They are actually ultra connected. On average, they have 3 times more friends on Facebook than a Gen Xer, right? So they have large networks. And they share everything. They are keen to provide feedback, and actually they trust their peers much more than the brands when it comes to providing them guidance. They are in search of experience. Now, they value experience much more than ownership. They value memories much more than material possessions. Now, of course, this could mean a shift from goods to services in terms of spending, as 3 out of 4 millennials declare they're ready to reduce their spending on luxury goods to be able to spend more on luxury experience. But beyond that shift, actually, it also means that millennials have a high expectation for every interaction they would live with a brand. So brand experience is also very important. Now, what's the great luxury experience for a 25-year-old wealthy millennial entering a store is probably something that is still in the making. Now, last but not least, they are highly visual and they are emotionally connected, right? Having a camera always in the hand has made millennials replace text with images, right? And if you want to appeal to them and catch their attention in a world where they are bombarded with information, you need to speak to their emotions. Now, as we don't have much time, and actually not at all, I'm just going to quickly skip through a few of these. So first, digital natives. So I skip the numbers. They use a lot of mobile device, spend time online, etc. But what is more important is the right-hand side here. So what you see is what we at McKinsey call the consumer decision journey, right? It's a representation of the path to purchase. And it represents the fact that today consumers don't go anymore through a linear purchase funnel, but they actually go through an iterative loop where they interact with brands across a multiplicity of touch points. Now, as the first digital native generation, millennials have developed very different behaviors at each step of that journey. First, in the consideration step, millennials have a broader consideration set. They consider more brands than their parents did, right? And they are much more open to innovation. They are the first ones to launch, to jump on new, emerging, small niche brands, designer brands. At the evaluation stage, they go through very hectic pathways, combining lots of digital touchpoints, a huge importance of word of mouth, and then the store, which still remains, even for that generation, paramount. When it comes to the actual purchase, millennials are actually leading the pack on e-commerce and m-commerce. In our latest Alta Gamma McKinsey research on digital luxury experience, we calculated that the share of online luxury goods sales is around 8.5%, but it's actually more than 15% for millennials and below 4% for the boomers. So huge generation gap there. And the post-purchase experience, I'm not going to mention it, but they are sharing everything, be it positive or less positive feedback on their experience and their products. Another key characteristic is it's a trade-off generation. I said they are value-driven, they are looking for deals, so they are ready to actually overspend in some areas and to really underspend in others. So we've been talking about mix and match for a long time, in fashion, for instance, with people wearing a Zara dress with a Chanel handbag. We see the same across categories. So millennials would fly on a low-cost airline to overspend on a luxury 5-star resort. They would spend fortunes to buy, a collection of luxury goods to fill their closet, but they would spend most of their time actually on consumer-to-consumer resale platforms. They are ultra-connected, they are engaged. 44% of millennials are ready to engage with brands. But on the other side of the equation, 81% of them are expecting a response from the brand in less than 48 hours, and a response that is actually authentic and consistent. So that's probably the challenging part of the equation for the brands. Now, experience, as I was saying, there are two sides to this experience thing. First, the purchasing experience and experience with brands. 50% of millennials are willing to pay a premium, and 60% of them make actually brand experience their #1 purchase factor. When it comes to experiential luxury, there was a research done at the end of last year in the US where 61% of millennials were declaring that they are spending in a way or another on luxury travel. It's only 48% of Gen X and 35% for boomers, all across the same wealth level. Now, beyond millennials, there is Gen Z. We started discussing a bit Gen Z yesterday. These are people born since the year 2000. I actually have 3 Gen Zers at home, so I'm observing with a lot of curiosity what's happening there. Gen Z is already more than 2 billion people on the planet today, and it keeps growing because they keep being born every day. So it's a large group and a growing group. And they already have a major influence on the market, even though a few of them are already spending because they are influencing their parents and their family members on the purchase. Now, do you believe that Gen Zers would be very different from millennials? Or would it be more of the same? Are we going to go through another disruption? Well, there is, of course, not much evidence yet in terms of purchasing behavior. But once you understand that the Gen Z is actually growing in a context that is very different from the one millennials were born in, you can envision that actually they might be quite different. Let me take just a few examples. Millennials enjoyed DVD libraries at home. But Gen Z, they only knew YouTube and streaming platforms. Very different. No ownership. When it comes to music, millennials were dreaming to get iPod 1, iPod 2, iPod 3 to be able to carry their music in a pocket, right? So dematerialized music, but still possessed music. Gen Z is only dreaming about a Spotify account where for the flat fee you get unlimited access to content. Instant messaging. So millennials were the first ones to launch the text message and SMS, etc., and the emojis. But actually for the Gen Z, it's visual apps like Snapchat that are actually the preferred way of communicating. Now, we say millennials are digital and mobile, but actually their first phone was still an old-style Nokia kind of phone, whereas Gen Z has only known interactive screens, touch and snap with internet at their fingertips. So these are just a few examples, but you can already understand where I'm getting. So, what to expect? It's difficult to be very factual and affirmative, which is a difficult exercise for a McKinsey partner. So let me try to just ask a few questions, maybe provocative one. Could we end up in a fully casual world, right? Would it be the end of formal wear brand, of women high heel shoes? Probably not, but there are significant category shifts today that brands must watch and adapt if they want to succeed in the long run. Will we see the end of the physical store? For sure not. It's a very important theater for the customer experience. But will it be the same kind of store as the ones we know today? Probably not. Will we see a niche brand era where the old, very large, old luxury brands will actually suffer from customers turning their back to more brands? Maybe. Will we see the rise of emotional marketing where there will be not text and just emoticons everywhere? I don't believe so, but probably a different kind of marketing in the future. Will we see social celebrities as being, the single luxury brand ambassadors replacing, the supermodels of the 80s and 90s that we knew at the time, and so on and so on. So many questions for luxury brands. And actually, if I try to summarize 5 questions, because there are more than that, but the 5 that I think are particularly striking is first, what is an engaging brand value proposition for that generation when do is the new have, and offering great products is probably not sufficient anymore? How should brands rethink their operating model when now is the new soon? So we've seen already significant transformation in supply chain with the see now, buy now trend, but it's probably only the beginning of a broader transformation in the industry. A third question is, how can luxury brands maintain consistency when more than 95% of the brand content is produced by consumers? It's not under their control anymore. How can they influence them and their communities and their friends? Because all that matters is what friends would say, not what brands will say. And last but not least, how do brands manage the dialogue when I like or I hate is just one click away and you need to react quickly to that? So these are complex issues and there is no easy answer, and I'm not gonna, because we're out of time, I know. But let me just share a few departing thoughts. 5 keys to win the hearts and minds of the young generation. First, listen to them. Understand intimately what they value, and if needed, well, just adjust what you propose and how you communicate it. Think digital first. That's how they think. It's not about translating offline content on digital platforms, right? It's really about thinking digital first across all touchpoints. Market with them, do not market to them. Engage them in the ongoing dialogue. Consider them as being part of the brand ecosystem and not just as end consumers and buyers. Leverage their ultra-social connectedness. Do not suffer for it, but develop proactive influencer marketing strategies and proactive actions to actually generate buzz on your brands. And last but not least, make them feel unique. Offer them something personal in the way you address them, in the products you offer them. So I think ongoing research will be needed over the coming years to make sure that we continue to bring more facts and more evidence to this. But even though Gen Y and Gen Z are not going to turn their back to luxury, they will probably redefine luxury in their own terms. So it's a journey, it's a discovery journey, it's a fascinating journey, but it's really worth the effort when you look at the business opportunity. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nathalie.
My pleasure.
Nathalie, thank you so much. That was fascinating. It's always nice to put some figures to the thoughts. We don't have tons of time, but one thing I did really want to ask you as I listened to you, maybe it's wrong of me, but it felt very Eurocentric, quite a lot of this. And given the rise of China, the spending power of the Chinese, all you have to do is go to Galeries Lafayette on a certain morning and, you know, half of China's there with their detox and buying luxury goods. But how long will this last? How different are Chinese millennials, would you say, and how does one approach them differently?
So I think there are lots of similarities. As I was saying, millennials are global citizens, and actually the cultural differences that we were seeing in Gen X are much less there when we're looking at the younger generation. Lots of Chinese millennials who went to the US for their studies. Lots of them have traveled much more as a percentage than their parents. So it's more of a global community. Now, this being said, there are some differences. And I would say maybe as a summary, in China, everything is more acute. Everything is just faster to happen. So they are more digital. They are spending more online. They are faster to jump to new brands. I mean, everything is just more intense there. We had Tao yesterday on stage, and I discussed with him last night over dinner. The power of bloggers in China is just incredible, and I think is actually much more important than the importance of bloggers even in the US.
Just as long as they stay off politics.
Yes.
Stick to luxury.
Yes.
And then do you think as China advances, the sort of logomania will begin to slow down? And can you imagine a Chinese brand that takes the world the way, let's say, some of the best Western brands have taken China?
These are two questions. On the logo, I think, we are seeing trends. I mean, look at the last fashion shows. It was full of logos. So I think more or less it's going to evolve over time. I think what we are seeing happening in China, though, is that consumers become luxury literate very quickly. I keep saying in Japan, everything is slower than we expect, just like in India. In China, everything is faster than we expect. So it took 10 years to Chinese luxury buyers to go the path it took 30 years to Japanese luxury buyers to go through, right? So We distinguish very often the primo-accédant, the first-time luxury buyers in China, from those that are already experienced luxury buyers. And there you see indeed a very different brand mix in terms of what they are looking for. And this is true in China, but if you do the same in Europe, you would find the same. Like a first-time luxury buyer would not follow the same logic in the purchase as the person who is buying, you know, a luxury handbag every month, right? So that difference is there.
Okay. I mean, we really are pressed for time, but it would be unfair not if a couple of people in the audience really have pressing questions, please stick up your hand, and we'll try to put them together. There's a question back there. Could you identify yourself also, please?
Hello. Don't you think that we are all millennials? Because we are all on digital every day. We are consuming also Instagram and more visual things. So finally, is it really a difference?
Well,
let's just see, just because of time, let's get one more question there, and then you can answer what you like.
Okay. Luxury of choice.
Hi,
Please.
Francesca Demayak from the Ethical Trading Initiative. I was interested in your comment, and you know, it's commonly said that millennials are a very values-driven audience, and we've heard a lot at this conference about, you know, the meaning and authenticity of the brand, but not so much on luxury brands really touting sustainability values and showing that you know, their products are made in an ethical way. And I think that there's a perception in the luxury industry that if you're paying more for a product, then you know, that's made under safe and decent working conditions. So, but if you look at the benchmarking, and Jonathan from Versace mentioned the benchmarking yesterday, where actually the luxury brands are scoring much lower than the high street on what they're doing around ethical trade and working conditions. So my question is, do you think that there's an opportunity for luxury brands to actually engage this increasingly important audience by showing that they're making products in an ethical way?
Is there one more, and then we'll back to Nathalie? Yes, back there, gentleman back there. Thank you.
My name is Mark Nelson. I've been told that the baby boomers are a more educated group of people because of their age, and that the millennials sometimes don't have the knowledge or education of what things really cost. I'm talking about the higher end goods, whether it be maybe a fancy watch or home furnishings. They're not old enough. They haven't observed their parents. They don't really know what things cost. Can you comment on that?
Okay, great. So back to you.
Okay. So I'll go quickly. I think we are not all millennials, unfortunately, except maybe in our minds. But in terms of behavior, as I was saying, they are trendsetters. So everything they do is actually very rapidly spreading across other generations, both up and down. So yes, even the Gen Xers have changed dramatically their behavior, and it will continue to be that way, I believe. On sustainability, that's an interesting question. Actually, that's one we could spend a lot of time on. Every research shows that consumers are not ready to pay a premium for sustainable brands. So it's more that it's an expectation they would have, but not something they would be ready to pay for. So that's, I think, a first element. A second element is the reason why high street mass market fashion brands have moved very actively on the topic is because they've been caught, right? And they suffered, and we have lots of examples on that front. In luxury, it has not happened yet, even though, you know, if you look at the leather goods supply chain, even diamonds, I mean, you have many
vulnerabilities.
Vulnerabilities for luxury brands. I think it's moving. When you look at the large European headquartered luxury groups, they are working actively on it. Some are communicating on it or start to communicate on it. I think it's easier to communicate when you've done part of the work than when you are at early stages. So we'll probably see more of that coming. And to your question, I think, you know, millennials are actually the first generation to be less wealthy than the previous generation globally, which is a real change because, you know, it has always been that kids would, you know, outperform their parents in terms of wealth, and for the first time, it's not the case. I think this is one of the reasons why they are value-driven and why they are, I think they actually know what €1 or $1 is, but the way they think about spending is different. So they are probably spending more as a percentage of their revenue in discretionary spending. Approximately in the US, in our research, it was 25% more. So for the same wealth level, they would spend 25% more than the older generation on discretionary spending at large. But the way they spend is then also by making trade-offs. They would have some very, very cheap things. And on the other hand, they would buy very expensive products.
Great. Well, listen, thank you. We're, before we thank Nathalie, just to tell you we're off to a coffee break, which I'm sure you'd all like, but come back quickly because we will discuss what one imagines hopes to be the post-Weinstein era in fashion. So, Nathalie, thank you very much.
My pleasure.